ppmeditsmyshots@gmail.com. What? There's 8,000 emails. Oh my god, how am I gonna even choose? There's hundreds of pages. There's... What's up, everybody? Peter McKinnon here. Welcome back to another video. Today is the day we've been waiting for. I'm super excited for this video. Today I'm editing your raw photos. The other day, I put out an Instagram story that said, if you want to participate on Thursday, that's today, I'm going to be making a video editing your raw photos. So send them to this email right here. And for those of you that actually did send them here, thank you. Anyone that sent them anywhere else, instantly deleted. But that email got more than 8,000 hits in less than like 24 hours. In the first 40 minutes of me making that Instagram story, there was 2,000 emails, Gmail locked the account. So we bought more storage and then I got locked out 3 times total trying to make this video because it was like, unusual activity, way too high, too many emails, stop downloading attachments. Wow, honestly, I'm blown away. So the sheer interest in this topic of you guys wanting me to edit your shots, thank you, that's awesome. I'm super excited. I've picked 9 different pictures to edit, a couple from different people, some just one, some a couple, depending on the photos. It was a lot of work to go through, and I'm already looking forward to the next one that we do. So if your photo doesn't get edited today, don't worry, I'm gonna make this a series. This will be episode 1, but we will lay some ground rules going forward. So don't send any more emails. I'm not taking any submissions right now. If you send an email with your photos to edit today or any other day until I announce it, it's just gonna get deleted. I wanted to give a big shout out to everyone that submitted, especially the people that I'm gonna be editing their photos today. Thank you for letting me do this. It's also important to say, I am not the best editor in the world. There are far better than me. This is just like my style and how I interpret these photos. It's my personal preference, the colors that I feel would look good. This is how I would edit my own shots. With that being said, I just wanna make it a friendly environment everywhere in the comments and all that stuff, because these people, that takes courage to submit a raw photo of yours for millions of people to see, for someone that you don't even really know. That's awesome, and I just wanted to get that out of the way before we rolled into the first edits of today's video. Here are 2 shots that he submitted. One is a lake, just like a landscape, and the other is of him standing in front of the lake. Obviously he was hiking, he's got his camera stuff on his back, that looks cool. Aljaz, you are from Slovenia, so thank you for submitting all the way over. I would love to go to Slovenia and like Lake Bled, fog, canoe, just cut, please. I'm gonna pick the one of him standing because I like the fact that there's a subject more. Just the landscape shot, I feel like it's a little too heavy in just the water. I would have loved to have seen more of the rolling landscape in the distance, be it that's mountains or more sky. I just feel like the foreground's a little too dominant for me. So when I crop this for Instagram, which I'm gonna be, by the way, cropping all of these in a 4:5 format for social posts, so keep an eye out for that. There's a few in here that they're just too good landscape. I don't wanna crop them, but for the most part, 4:5. Okay, so one of the first things I did with this photo is I changed his jacket from green to yellow. There was just something about the green in the snow that looked weird to me. I figured the yellow looked a lot better. Now, I had a little bit of difficulty changing the yellow at first because I was messing around with the HSL sliders and tabs, lens corrections to get rid of the vignetting on the sides. You could see he actually captured quite a bit of snowfall. It was obviously snowing while he shot this. I added a little bit of snow myself. It's a very subtle snow addition. It's not like a crazy blizzard. I didn't put motion blur on it. I just dropped the opacity a little bit to even make it look potentially like water spots. So water spots or snow, I added that in and then left the opacity around like 20%, maybe even less, just so it was like just showing up, because it didn't really need to be there. I just felt like if you notice it, it just makes the photo feel a little more dramatic. So dehazed it a little bit to get some of the highlights back in those clouds, threw on a couple gradient masks with exposure to make sure like the sky was good and the ground, the foreground, all that. And I couldn't really get the yellow that I wanted. It wasn't until I was in Photoshop using selective color versus the HSL tabs in Lightroom that I was able to really drop the cyan from that yellow and make it pop into that like orangey yellow that I really wanted to make this subject stand out even more so, in my opinion, in a more pleasing way than the green jacket. I also increased the blue tone in the image to make it feel cold colder, make it feel a little more Arctic, because he is standing on a snowy rock in front of what could even be almost a frozen lake surrounded by snowy mountains. It's just got that winter vibe to it. Like, this is the exact type of photo I would take. Had so much fun editing this. I cropped it for Instagram, centering him because he was standing on that rock. I had it with a little more negative space with headroom because I love that. I love like a little small object with a lot of atmosphere. But with this particular photo, because he's standing on this rock, I needed to keep that in there. So this is my edit for you, Al Jazz. Hope you enjoy it. Great photo, amazing location, super jealous, and thank you so much for submitting. All right, Calum Morrison is next on the list. Calum is a British photographer. These photos were taken in the Alps. I chose these photos because I really liked the dog and I liked the landscape. It was kind of like two nice contrasting subjects, and I found that the originals were, especially the dog, were underexposed enough that I could have some fun playing with it, bringing back the shadows and the highlights. I started by always correcting my horizons, making sure it was nice and straight, and then I wanted to see how much detail I could bring back by sliding down the highlights, lifting up the shadows, trying to dial in that exposure so that I could start editing from a place that was a little more, further down the line. I don't want to start adding presets or start messing with color or clarity or any of those things until the exposure is pretty much dialed. Then I can go into the more creative coloring option. I'm going to use my preset Ember here because I feel like that lends itself to the color of the coat of this beautiful little furry four-legged friend here. I applied that preset, and then from that point, because I've always suggested that presets are a great starting point, manipulating from there. The preset Ember looks good for colors, but it was just a little bit too dark. So I was able to adjust that with the shadows and the highlights and the whites. And that preset particularly kills all the blues, but it looked like a really nice summer day. So I brought a little bit of those blues back, but primarily wanted it to be that like teal and orange color on the slightly muted side. Also added a couple masks to this photo, one to brighten up the dog itself, but keep the background exposure the same, and then a second to brighten up the dog's eyeball, but not brighten up the entire photo. I just wanted the eyeball. So I made two of those masks just for exposure, bumped that a little bit, cropped it, center framed, negative space with the headroom like my preference is, and you are left with a photo that looks like this. That's a good looking dog you got there. He's got another landscape shot of this cabin. Now the cabin, there's a few things I noticed right off the bat. The exposure of this photo is pretty spot on. Like, you can see the detail in the clouds, you can see all the detail in the foreground. There's not one part of the photo that I feel is too dark, so he nailed exposure in camera, which is just gonna make this photo easier to edit. My one issue was I wasn't sure where the subject was, because we have a shed off to the left, kind of lower thirds, and then a couple feet over we've got someone standing who's also a subject, so we're kind of competing for, because he's far enough away from that shed, he's not interacting with it, he's not sitting on the edge of it, he's not coming out the door, he doesn't have like some camping bags leaning against it. All this to say, there's two subjects here. So probably gonna start by cropping this a little bit to get rid of a lot of the foreground. I feel like there's a lot of information there, a lot of space that I just don't need, because most of the photo, most of the activity that's happening in this photo is on the left side. So I'm gonna crop in so it makes that more of a prominent focus. Same things, I'm gonna draw these masks on. I love using these gradient masks, both for the sky, for the foreground, to make sure that I can grab saturation and contrast out of that foreground without affecting the rest of the photo. I did the same thing for the sky so I could kill those highlights even more and bring back more definition with the clouds. And this just felt like a good mountain shot cabin. I want to pop that red a little bit more. I want to kind of keep the colors, the overall tones of the photo a little more muted but sharp, especially when you're shooting in mountains. You can really draw mood from any type of picture when you're shooting in landscapes like this. So you can see I've kept the orange and yellows in the foreground, but moved them more so they don't look like grass per se. It looks a little more, stylized, a little more moody. And then we muted some of the blues in the mountains and the sky to just, again, get that kind of darker contrast, those darker tones, bring out the moods of the mountain. And we popped that red on the shed so that it, it's the focal point. Now I've cropped this for Instagram and I chose to go this way, centering both him and the shed together, not just centering the shed or centering him, because then it would look off. Because those two subjects are split, I put them both in the middle, and that would be my crop decision. I was to post this online. Caleb, thanks so much. Great photos. Keep up the great work. Hope you enjoyed the edits, and thank you so much for your submission. All right, next up we have Daniel Hawk. What a cool cool last name. Hawk, I think I'm gonna go with Hawk because that's dope. 23-year-old wildlife photographer from the UK, Northamptonshire. That's a lot of letters in that. I didn't think that would end. Been shooting since he was 14 years old. His favorite animal is the red squirrel. So he was able to set up his tripod between two stumps, two trees where he saw these squirrels jumping and waited to time it perfectly to capture this squirrel midair in between those two stumps. First off, I'm not even sure how you were able to get the photo that you got this well. Kudos right off the bat. This photo is so tack sharp. It's so perfectly sharp, nailed focus. There's no motion blur. I'm super impressed. So I was really excited to get to edit this photo. And this is one of those photos where the exposure is great, the framing is great. He's framed between these two stumps. The depth of field on this photo is insane. Perfectly smooth, creamy background. The foreground has enough detail but still blurred out. I don't even really need to do anything for this photo at all. But the one thing that I knew I already wanted to do was I made a preset specifically for green photos back in the fall called Wolf's Wood. I know literally with one click I can make this photo pretty much just pop the way I'm thinking about it. So I did that. I went in, applied Wolf's Wood preset, brought it into Photoshop, pumped up the orange a little bit on that little red squirrel, sharpened it with an unsharp mask. Probably didn't need to do that because it added a little bit of unwanted noise to the background, but sometimes when I see noise added, I then add myself a little bit of grain to make it feel like that style was intentional. Or you can, bring that luminance up a little bit and try to remove that grain, but then it starts looking a little bit weird. So I probably could have gone a little bit less on the sharpening there, but Wolf's Wood, it just brought it right home to where I'm happy with that. Now, this particular photo, I would not go 4x5 on this particular photo. I would want it full landscape because it's just framed so beautifully. I didn't even bother trying to crop it. I was messing around with it and it was not working for me, and I just decided, you know what? Nope, this is one of those rare occasions where you drop it in landscape and you accept your applause. Good job, man. This is a dope photo. Thank you so much for submitting. Okay, next up we have Gal Isayev. Terribly sorry, guys. Names are very hard to pronounce. Gal is not. Super cool name. 25 years old, from Israel, and took this amazing shot of this subject walking straight down what looks like an old desert country road. The exposure is great right off the start. The framing is perfect. So I love center framed photos, so this was going to be very easy to edit. I think it's just like the wannabe composite photographer inside me, because I'm not the best at it. It's something that I do work on. People like Visuals of Julius on Instagram that I've shouted out before. His skills are insane. I need to go hang up that guy for like 2 months. The first thing I saw with this photo was the massive sky, and there is detail in the sky. You can see I brought down the highlights and the shadows, and it revealed way more detail in those clouds, which was great. For me, it just felt like I just need to stick a mountain back there. Like I need an isolated mountain in the very back, and make it feel like it's like, the Sierra Mountains, or we're out in Colorado somewhere. That's just like the instant vibe I got when I saw this photo. So the first thing I did was take out the power lines. Now they're subtle, but you do see them in there, and they were distracting me. So I brought this into Photoshop, went ahead, did the content aware fill, got rid of all 3 of those power lines separately. Probably could have done it in one chunk, but I didn't want it to mess up the sky pattern too much, so I did them individually, bringing it back into Lightroom, tweaking it to where I'm happy getting that base down so I can bring it back into Photoshop again and start messing around with this mountain. So I found this mountain online on a stock site with an isolated white background. I was able to cut out that white background, keep it close to the mountain's edge, and then just kind of add some fog on top. I masked out the subject so that she would be in front of the mountain, and then we just added some tone curves. Now these tone curves within Photoshop are gonna help me match the color of that mountain better to the original color of this photo. And then I went ahead and added some lens blur because the subject is in perfect focus. The background is pretty far away, so that mountain would not be realistically tack sharp. So I added a little bit of lens blur to try and help make it look a little more realistic. And then I added a couple layers of fog just to make it feel like it was a little bit further back in the background. So that's what the fog was for, bringing it back into Lightroom, running one of my presets on it called Louise, I believe was the one I used, and then I tweaked it further from there to kind of give it like a fresh, bright blue, kind of with some red hints, summery vibe, because, we're not in the mountains. The mountains are the background, so we don't want it to feel cold. I still want it to have that desert Sierra Nevada feel to it. So that's what I came up with. That is the edit. So I hope you enjoy it. It's a little out there, I know, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So thank you so much for submitting. You're a great photographer, great capture. Moving right along to an individual by the name of Jacob Graff. from the Czech Republic. This shot was also taken in the mountains, which looks a bit like cottage country from where I'm from, and we have the subject here floating in the lake. This is a great shot. It's creative, it's cool composition, it's not something you see all the time, so I was pretty excited to get to work on this. I can see the subject under the water a little bit, so I know if I bring back those shadows and highlights, we're gonna recover some of the body. But looking at this photo, one of the first things I wanted to do was take down how blue the water was. When I'm shooting in cottage country or I'm up north, and that's just a personal preference to me, one of the things I don't like very much is how green and blue both the sky and the water and the trees look. I find that really hard to edit with, and when people kind of just use those photos and pump the saturation a little bit and send it off there, I feel like it doesn't have the stylized tone it deserves. So one of the first things I wanted to do with this photo was desaturate it. I went into the HSL tabs, completely killed the green color so those trees are gone in the background. I muted the blues as well, and then what I wanted to do was add another couple layers of fog like I did in the last video to make it feel a little more eerie, kind of creepy, and maybe a little bit like horror-esque, dream state, like all those things encompassed. That was the mindset I had while editing this photo. So playing around with the settings in Lightroom to get that the best I can, lifting the blacks, raising the shadows, bringing back that detail under the surface of the water, getting that fog in there to build those layers to make it feel kind of ominous. And then after I was done doing all those things, I ran a preset to give it my stylized look, which was, I believe, North, which kind of just added a lot more brightness and like white to the photo, which then dialed back, gives me, with a little touch of sharpen, gives me the look that I'm looking for, which is this photo right here. It's quite a difference, but it has that creepy kind of horror ominous vibe that I wanted to go for when I first saw this shot. So obviously it could be taken in any direction. I just feel this is more of like the fine art direction, but I'm really happy with how it came out, and it was a great capture. So thanks so much for submitting your photo. Okay, next up we have a 22-year-old photographer from Montreal, Quebec, who shot this particular capture, this frame, last weekend during a snowstorm. He said he saw this old woman carrying these grocery bags down the middle of the street during a heavy snowstorm, and he just thought like, wow, no one even wants to go outside. It's negative 30 degrees Celsius. That was his premise for this photo, was to show how unique it was. I wanted to add more snow, but it was clearly snowing enough. It looked already dramatic from the raw capture, and just with the feeling that I got from this and this old woman carrying these bags, he gave me a little bit of context. I felt like a black and white photo was the best way to go. So I actually switched Lightroom over to monochrome and adjusted all my settings that way to affect the black and white a little bit better, added some noise, messed around with the shadows and the contrast to get a little more of a vintage look there. And instead of using the dehaze tool, which normally brings back detail and clarity and cuts through the fog, I actually went the opposite way to give it a little more fog and take away a little bit of the detail to make that black and white photo really just give you the feels. So it's not an intense edit, but I feel like it's a very intentional edit that describes the story that happened last week very well. So thanks so much for your capture. I appreciate you submitting that photo. That looks like one hell of a snowstorm I wish I was in. Okay, next up we have 21-year-old photographer Saeed Khan. Saeed's from London and he's using a Canon 200D. Now, I chose this photo because I liked the streetwear / urban vibes that I could clearly tell he was going for here. So looking at the raw photo straight off, I bring this up in Lightroom, I'm thinking, okay, cool. I need to lift the shadows, fix the exposure so I can see the subject better. And then the yellow lines in this bus are just competing way too much against the subject. So I need to isolate the subject more with like an oval exposure mask so that I can like darken the entire photo except the subject and play around with the brightness of the yellow in these handlebars on the bus. So streetwear and urban wear and those types of vibes and these types of photos, I always kind of have more of a feeling of nighttime. I feel like they shine and they excel at night. Like all these guys go out in the streets and rooftops and capture really cool stuff when most of the world's asleep or done for the day. So I wanted to kind of add that night vibe to this photo by making it a little more blue, adding a couple extra features, and then I finished it off with an actual anamorphic flare to kind of give it a little pop. Doing all those things, adding some vignette to this photo, making those masks. I did several masks, I did it a few times. I brought it into Photoshop, I messed with the yellow, added that flare, but I dropped the opacity just slightly because I didn't want it to be too obnoxious, too over the top. But this is what I ended up with at the end of it after a couple clone stamps and a couple things here and there. Tweaked it, 4x5 crop. That's where I landed with your photo, man. So I'm super pumped with this. One thing that maybe I would do now looking at it a couple hours later, I would maybe pop the purple in the detail of his jacket slightly just to get a little more color than just the yellow and blue. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, and I must say that flare is just, it's tasty. Thanks so much for your photos, really appreciate it, and great job. Next up we have Shervin, who shot these photos from a drone on the east coast of Italy. Sometimes being able to see a massive landscape really kind of makes you feel like you're immersed inside it. You know, it gives you a sense of scale to maybe how big the people were or how big that item is, in this case, the castle. And it's a great photo. It's a great photo to start. Drone photos are just notoriously a little harder to edit all the time. I don't know why it is. It's just there's something about editing a DJI drone photo that I've always found a little more difficult. But I mean, you've got your layers in this photo. You can see the rolling hills in the back, the mountain peaks. There's detail and definition in the sky and the foreground. It was composed well. It's actually a really, really great shot. The only thing that it's not doing it for me is just how blue the photo is. It just looks a little too blue and summery, and it doesn't have that stylized look that I'm going for when I'm posting my images online. So I think all I'm gonna do is run a preset on this, and I think Ember would make this look really good. So I did that. I ran Ember, lifted the shadows a little bit, cropped it for Instagram, and this was the photo that I ended up with. And I like how muted it is. I moved it over from the center. I didn't want to keep it center framed because we have a little bit of like ruins from the castle as well. So I wanted to include those in that 4x5 frame. And I just like the muted softness of those rolling hills in the background while still being able to see those white caps. I didn't kill the blue saturation entirely. I dropped it to about 10%, so it is there if you look. It's not completely black and white. And now it looks a little more like maybe the sun is setting and that orange glow from the sun is just hitting the side of that castle right before the light vanishes for the day. So that's the decision I made for this photo, and great capture, man. That looks like an awesome place to fly the drone. Super jelly. Just gonna put it out there. Thank you so much for your submission. Okay, and we are at the last submission of the day, and it is none other than a buddy of mine, Matt Littlewood, who actually submitted some photos of his from some recent travels. I believe he was in Peru and all over the place, South America, really kind of getting around the globe there, bud. So again, jealous of that, but he gave me 3 really great photos. I found this very interesting because the first thing I thought of when I looked at these photos, here's one of a girl standing on a cliff edge, and here's another one of an incredible looking subject wearing the most colorful, amazing clothing. Like this would be such a great edit. This kind of thing is just, it stands out. Just the infinite looking squares that diminish into the distance with this subject nicely centered with that dark background that makes him pop, and the clothing, it's great. So, and then moving on to the third one, which was this picture of a cheetah, which was great. Super close up of a cheetah's eye. I don't even know I should check the EXIF data on this to see what lens you used to shoot that, because wow, that's close. But these 3 photos, like, I don't even really think they need that much work to be editing. So first off, I started with this guy in this kind of this temple looking situation. What I wanted to do was mute a lot of the colors, bring that vignette down, and I wanted to add some smoke into this. I just feel like smoke would look good and make that subject pop a little bit more. So I could smoke layer over the entire photo with like a screen blending mode, and then just layer mask out my subject to make him really, really clear, which would give me like a really stylized looking photo. So after all those things were done, you can see I killed a lot of the brown in this photo, a lot of like the natural stone looking color. I removed it completely to make it feel a little more like we were inside the cave, not outside trying to see in. I wanted to make it feel more inclusive. That was a really fun one to edit, Matt. So great capture on that. Really had a good time. Now the cheetah, that's a great photo. Like I don't really need to do anything here besides pump the saturation and brightness of the cheetah's coat itself. I didn't feel like it was orange enough, so I just made it a little more orange, added a bit of clarity, threw an oval mask over his eye to just brighten it up a little bit and add some vibrance to that. And now cropping this to 4x5, there's a lot of dead space on the left side of this photo. The cheetah's body is out of focus. It's not in like our plane of focus. So I just moved that 4x5 frame all the way over and framed the cheetah's eye, so it was just like half his face for this frame, and it feels more intentional. It feels like the photo was shot this way versus having all that detail on the left side that we weren't gonna use. This feels like this was the purpose for this photo. So I'm really happy with how that crop came out. I love how bright the whiskers are just popping off the corner of that photo. Incredible. I would love to know the story of that shot. And then the last one, the mountain peak. Again, we've got a subject standing right on the edge, and that background is just making her pop. It's such a great photo already. There were so many layers of this photo that looked great with sharpness and clarity that like it was almost distracting because you were just looking around it too much. So initially I had like this banging sunset because the pinks were just on fire in this photo and the blues were great. So I ran my Louise preset to kind of like just whitewash the photo a little bit, and then I slowly started bringing those colors back, but I added a couple layers of fog and masking to the top to try to like pull your focus to the subject more so you're not distracted. Center frame that gave her tons of headroom, small people in big places, again, great for a 4x5 frame. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. It feels really dream state. This looks like it was probably taken either like right after golden hour or at like the crack of dawn. So like right when you got up. Again, like the water looks insane. I wish I was standing there. 3 incredible photos. So thank you so much for submitting. And that brings us to a conclusion for all of the photos I'm editing in this first episode of PM Edits My Shots. To everyone that submitted photos, thank you so much. It takes courage to put your work out there, your raw photos out there for everyone to see, and for me to manipulate how I think they look good, which could be completely different from what you think looks good. So for that very reason, thanks so much for letting me do this. It was a lot of fun. Like I said at the beginning, no longer taking submissions for photos, so do not email me photos to edit. When it is time to make the next episode, I will make it very clear. I will make an announcement and I will have a new place for you to send photos to, and we'll do this again, but I'm most definitely gonna do it again because it was so much fun. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode. I hope you learned something, got a little bit of insight into the editing process yet again, and enjoyed watching, seeing other people's work from all over the world. That's one of the coolest parts of this. I mean, these are photographers spanned across the planet, showing us different pockets, different cultures, different styles. And that's what makes this really fun, especially for me, because I get to edit things that I don't normally get to edit. Again, thank you so much. Hit that like button if you like this video, smash it if that's something that you're into, 2019 style. Hit the like button, hit the bell, do all of those things. And folks, I will see you next week. Peace. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around for the bloopers lately. The select few that don't just close. You're still here watching. You, specifically, you're laughing right now. Yeah, I can see? I know, and I appreciate you. Okay, now we're feeling uncomfortable. You're feeling it too. See, now you're laughing again. I know these things. When I smile, you smile. Stop. You smiled again. Okay. I'm actually going to go now. Dramatic pause because you weren't sure if I was actually going to go. Good at this. I'm good at this. I'm actually going. But like I said before, I'm just going over here just to be off frame. See ya.